The explosion threw Lisa Grant across the bridge of her ship. Warning lights flashed red as smoke filled the air. She could hear her crew shouting orders, but their voices were getting weaker. The Zephyrian attack had come from nowhere. "Hull, breach in Section 4, called out her pilot, Jake Martinez. His voice was strained with pain. Lisa could see blood running down his face. "Get us out of here," Lisa ordered, pulling herself up from the floor. The ship shook again as another energy blast hit them. Through the view screen, she could see the massive Zephyrian warship closing in. It was 3 times the size of her reconnaissance vessel. The bridge grew quiet. Too quiet. Lisa turned to see Jake slumped over his controls. She checked for a pulse but found none. One by one, she moved to each station. Her communications officer, Betty Walsh, was gone. Her engineer, Rick Foster, had died at his post. All of them were dead. Lisa was alone. The ship's power failed, and emergency lighting cast everything in a pale blue glow. She could hear the hull groaning under stress. The life support systems were failing. Soon, she would join her crew. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. The Zephyrians had boarded her ship. Lisa grabbed her sidearm and positioned herself behind the captain's chair. She had maybe 6 shots left. Not enough to fight off a boarding party, but enough to take a few of them with her. The bridge doors burst open. 4 Zephyrian warriors entered, their crystalline armor gleaming under the emergency lights. They were tall, nearly 8 feet each, with 4 arms and faces that looked like they were carved from living crystal. Each warrior carried energy weapons that hummed with deadly power. Lisa fired twice, hitting the lead warrior in the chest. The shots bounced off his armor without leaving a mark. Before she could fire again, one of the warriors shot her weapon from her hand with precise aim. "The human lives," said the lead warrior in broken English. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "War Prime Kethvar wants to see this one." 2 warriors grabbed Lisa's arms with their powerful hands. She tried to fight, but they were incredibly strong. They dragged her through her dying ship and into their vessel. The Zephyrian ship was massive inside, with high ceilings and walls covered in strange symbols. They brought her to a large chamber, where a figure sat on a throne made of what looked like black metal. This had to be War Prime Kethvar. He was larger than the other warriors, and his crystalline armor was decorated with battle trophies. Skulls from different species hung from his belt. "So this is a human," Kethvar said, standing up to look at her. "Smaller than I expected. Weaker, too." He walked around her like she was an interesting animal in a cage. "Your species thinks it can challenge the Zephyrian Empire. How foolish." Lisa said nothing. She kept her expression blank, not wanting to give him any satisfaction. "You destroyed one of our patrol ships last month," Kethvar continued. "Killed 12 of my warriors. I want to know how such weak creatures could defeat Zephyrian fighters." "Maybe your warriors aren't as strong as you think," Lisa said. Kethvar's eyes flashed with anger. He backhanded her across the face with one of his 4 arms. The blow sent her to the floor and she tasted blood in her mouth. "You will learn respect, human," he said. "But not through a quick death. That would be too merciful." He sat back down on his throne. "You will face the trial of blood." Lisa had never heard of this trial, but from the way the other warriors reacted, she knew it wasn't good. Some of them made sounds that might have been laughter. "The trial of blood is our most sacred tradition," Kethvar explained. "Captured, enemies fight our champions in single combat. If they survive all 5 trials, they earn their freedom. If they die, they provide entertainment for my crew." "And how many have earned their freedom?" Lisa asked, though she already suspected the answer. "None," Kethvar said with satisfaction. "The longest any species has lasted is 2 trials. Most die in the first." He gestured to his warriors. "Take her to the holding cells. She fights tomorrow." The warriors dragged Lisa through more corridors until they reached a section of the ship that was clearly a prison. They threw her into a small cell with metal bars. The floor was cold and hard, and there was only a small bench to sit on. As the guards walked away, Lisa examined her surroundings. The cell was basic but secure. The bars looked strong and there was only one way in or out. But she noticed that the guards followed a pattern when they checked on prisoners. They came by every 2 hours, always the same route. She also listened to their conversations. The Zephyrians spoke their own language most of the time, but occasionally used words she recognized. They seemed confident that she would die quickly in the trials. Some were already betting on how long she would last. Lisa used this time to think. She was trapped on an enemy ship, with no way to contact Earth. Her crew was dead, and her ship was destroyed. In less than 24 hours, she would have to fight alien warriors who were stronger, faster, and better armed than her. But she wasn't dead yet. And as long as she was alive, she could fight. She thought about her training, about every combat technique she had learned in her years with Earth Defense Corps. She thought about human history, about all the times her species had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to win. The Zephyrians saw humans as weak because they judged strength only by physical power. They didn't understand that human strength came from the mind, from the ability to adapt and overcome. They expected her to fight like a Zephyrian, but she was human. That night, as the alien ship traveled through space, Lisa Grant began to plan. She didn't plan to die in their arena. She planned to survive, to escape, and to make them regret ever capturing a human. The guards thought they were watching a defeated prisoner waiting for execution. They were wrong. They were watching a human warrior preparing for battle, and tomorrow, they would learn the difference. The guards came for Lisa before dawn. They dragged her from her cell and through corridors filled with Zephyrian warriors. Word of the humans' trial had spread throughout the ship, and everyone wanted to see the entertainment. They brought her to a massive chamber in the center of the vessel. The arena was circular, about 50 feet across, with high walls surrounding it. Above, thousands of Zephyrians filled the viewing areas, their crystalline faces gleaming under bright lights. Their excited chatter sounded like wind through a crystal cave. Lisa stood in the center of the arena, wearing the simple clothes they had given her. No armor, no protection. A guard threw a crude metal blade at her feet. The weapon was basic, more like a sharpened piece of scrap metal than a proper sword. Across from her, another door opened. Her opponent stepped into the arena, and the crowd roared with approval. The Zephyrian was young, she could tell. His armor was less decorated than the older warriors, and he moved with the eager energy of someone trying to prove himself. He was still massive compared to her, nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms. Each arm held a different energy weapon that glowed with deadly light. "I am Thecamore," he announced, his voice carrying across the arena. "I will have the honor of killing the human." The crowd cheered louder. War Prime Kethvar stood up in his viewing box. "Let the first trial begin," he called out. A horn sounded, and the fight started. Thecamore immediately began firing all 4 weapons at once. Lisa dove to the side, barely avoiding the energy blasts that scorched the ground where she had been standing. She rolled behind a pillar at the edge of the arena, using it for cover. The young warrior was eager to end the fight quickly. He charged toward her position, firing continuously. But Lisa noticed something important. When he used all 4 weapons, at the same time his shots were wild and uncontrolled. He was trying to do too much at once. Lisa waited until he was close, then darted out from behind the pillar. Instead of running away, she ran toward him. This surprised Thecamore, and his shots went wide as he tried to adjust his aim. She was much smaller and faster than he expected. While he was big and powerful, she could change direction quickly. She zigzagged across the arena floor, making herself a difficult target. Thecamore grew frustrated. The crowd was no longer cheering as loudly. Some Zephyrians were actually silent, watching the human avoid their champion's attacks. "Stand still and die with honor," Thecamore shouted, firing a concentrated blast that barely missed her head. "Honor is earned, not given," Lisa replied, continuing to move. She studied his pattern as she dodged. The young warrior had been trained in formal combat techniques, but he lacked real battle experience. He fired in predictable sequences, always leading with his upper right arm, then his lower left. After watching him for several minutes, she could almost predict where his shots would go. Lisa also noticed that his crystalline armor had joints where the pieces connected. These joints were smaller and looked less protected than the main plates. If she could get close enough, she might be able to find a weak spot. The problem was getting close. Thekmor had learned to keep his distance after her first surprise charge. He was staying back and trying to wear her down with long-range attacks. Lisa decided to use his pride against him. She stopped running and faced him directly. "Is this how Zephyrian warriors fight?" she called out loudly. "Hiding behind their weapons like cowards?" The insult hit home. Thekmor's crystalline face darkened with anger. The crowd began to murmur. For a Zephyrian warrior, being called a coward was the worst possible insult. "I am no coward," he roared, holstering two of his weapons. "I will kill you with honor." Now he only had two weapons active, and his shots became much more accurate. But Lisa had achieved what she wanted. His anger was making him sloppy, and with only two weapons, he had to get closer to be effective. Lisa continued to taunt him as she dodged. "Your war prime was right. You Zephyrians are not as strong as you think." Thekmor abandoned all strategy and charged at her in a rage. This was exactly what Lisa had been waiting for. As he rushed toward her, she dropped low and rolled between his legs. The move was so unexpected that he couldn't react in time. Before he could turn around, she was behind him with her metal blade. She had studied his armor carefully during the fight. Now she could see the joint she had noticed earlier, right where his neck connected to his torso. The crystalline plates didn't quite meet there, leaving a small gap. Thekmor spun around, raising his weapons, but Lisa was already moving. She jumped up using his own momentum against him and drove her blade into the gap in his armor. The metal pierced through the softer tissue beneath his crystalline exterior. Thekmor made a terrible sound like breaking glass and collapsed to the arena floor. His weapons fell silent and his body stopped moving. The arena fell completely quiet. Thousands of Zephyrian warriors stared in shock at the scene below them. A human, a creature they considered weak and primitive, had killed one of their champions. Lisa stood over Thekmor's body, breathing heavily. She was cut and bruised, but alive. She looked up at War Prime Kethvar in his viewing box. The alien leader's expression was unreadable. Finally, Kethvar spoke. "The human has survived the first trial." His voice carried no emotion, but Lisa could see that his grip on his throne was tighter than before. The guards came to escort her back to her cell. As they walked through the corridors, Lisa noticed that the Zephyrian crew looked at her differently now. Before, they had ignored her or looked at her with contempt. Now, there was something else in their crystalline eyes. It might have been respect, or it might have been fear. Back in her cell, Lisa tended to her wounds as best she could. She had won the first battle, but it was only the beginning. There would be 4 more trials, and each one would be harder than the last. But she had learned something important today. The Zephyrians could be beaten. Their strength was real, but it wasn't absolute. They made mistakes when they were angry, and their formal training made them predictable. Most importantly, she had planted a seed of doubt in their minds. They had seen one of their champions fall to a human. That was something they would not forget easily. As Lisa settled down to rest, she could hear the Zephyrian guards talking in the corridor. They were discussing her victory in hushed tones. Some sounded worried, others sounded angry. Good, she thought. Let them worry. Let them wonder what other surprises humans might have in store. Tomorrow would bring a new challenge, but tonight, she had given them something to think about. The human had drawn first blood, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The second day brought changes to the arena. When the guards brought Lisa from her cell, she saw that obstacles had been added to the fighting space. Tall metal pillars rose from the floor at various heights, creating a maze-like environment. Some pillars had sharp edges, others glowed with energy that would probably burn anyone who touched them. The crowd was larger today. Word of the humans' victory had spread throughout the ship, and more Zephyrians wanted to see what would happen next. Their crystalline faces reflected the arena's lights as they filled every available viewing space. Lisa's opponent was already waiting when she arrived. This warrior was different from young Thekmor. She was older, more experienced, and her armor bore the marks of many battles. Scars crisscrossed the crystalline surface, telling stories of fights survived. "I am Velthara," the warrior announced as Lisa picked up her metal blade from the arena floor. "I have fought in 67 battles and killed enemies from 12 different worlds. You got lucky yesterday, human. Today, you face a real warrior." War Prime Kethvar stood in his viewing box, watching carefully. "The second trial begins now," he called out. Velthara didn't charge forward like Thekmor had. Instead, she moved carefully through the obstacles, using them for cover while she studied Lisa's movements. Her 4 energy weapons remained ready, but she didn't fire wildly. Every shot was calculated and precise. Lisa quickly realized this would be a very different kind of fight. Velthara was patient, experienced, and smart. She wouldn't be tricked by simple taunts or fall for obvious traps. The veteran warrior used the arena's obstacles better than Lisa had expected. She moved from pillar to pillar, always keeping something between herself and Lisa while looking for the perfect shot. When she did fire, her energy blasts forced Lisa to move exactly where Velthara wanted her to go. Lisa found herself being herded toward one of the energy pillars. She could feel the heat from its glowing surface as Velthara's shots drove her closer and closer to it. If she touched that pillar, she would be burned badly, maybe killed. At the last second, Lisa dropped to the ground and rolled away. Velthara's next shot hit the energy pillar, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. The explosion created smoke that filled part of the arena. "Clever," Velthara called out through the smoke, "but tricks will not save you forever." Lisa used the smoke as cover to change position. While she moved, she thought about what she had learned about Zephyrian culture during her time in the cell. She had listened to the guards talking, picked up fragments of their language, and observed their behavior. Zephyrians valued honor above everything else, but their definition of honor was very specific. They believed that some tactics were beneath a true warrior. They also took great pride in their military history and their reputation as the galaxy's greatest fighters. Maybe she could use that pride against them. "Tell me, Velthara," Lisa called, out as she hid behind a metal pillar. "How does it feel to know that a human killed Thekmor?" The young one was careless, Velthara replied, moving to a new position. "I am not." "But what does it say about your training methods?" Lisa continued. "If your warriors can't even handle one human, how will they fare against a real human military force?" Lisa heard Velthara's footsteps pause. The taunt was working. "Our training is perfect," the warrior said, and Lisa could hear anger creeping into her voice. "Zephyrian methods have conquered half the galaxy." "Have they?" Lisa asked, moving again, to stay ahead of her opponent. "Because from what I've seen, your methods teach warriors to rely too much on technology and not enough on thinking." This struck home. Velthara fired several shots in quick succession, all missing as Lisa stayed mobile. The veteran warrior was getting emotional, just like Thekmor had. "You know nothing of Zephyrian ways," Velthara shouted. "I know enough," Lisa replied. "I know that you're so used to fighting weaker opponents that you've forgotten how to adapt. Your tactics worked fine against species that couldn't fight back, but humans are different." Lisa was gambling now. She didn't actually know much about other species the Zephyrians had conquered, but she was betting that most of them had been overwhelmed by superior technology rather than superior tactics. The gamble paid off. Velthara's firing pattern became more aggressive but less accurate. She was trying to prove her point through firepower rather than strategy. Lisa continued moving through the obstacles, staying just ahead of the energy blasts. But she wasn't just running anymore. She was leading Velthara toward a specific part of the arena. There was a cluster of metal pillars near one wall that formed a natural bottleneck. If Lisa could get Velthara to chase her into that area, the warrior's 4 weapons would become a disadvantage instead of an advantage. "You're right about one thing," Lisa called out as she ran toward the bottleneck. "I am just one human. Imagine what an entire human fleet could do to your empire." "Humans will never threaten the Zephyrian Empire," Velthara replied, following Lisa into the narrow space between the pillars. "Are you sure about that?" Lisa asked, turning to face her opponent. "After all, if one human can kill 2 of your Champions, what could 1,000 humans do? Velthara raised all 4 weapons, preparing to end the fight with overwhelming firepower. But she had made a crucial mistake. In the narrow space between the pillars, she couldn't spread out her arms properly. Her weapons interfered with each other, and the metal pillars blocked some of her shots. Lisa had deliberately chosen this battlefield. Here, her smaller size was an advantage, and Velthara's 4 weapons became a hindrance rather than a help. The experienced warrior realized her mistake too late. She tried to back out of the bottleneck, but Lisa was already moving. Using her blade like a lever, Lisa struck one of the energy pillars at just the right angle, causing it to fall toward Velthara. The veteran warrior had to choose between maintaining her firing position or dodging the falling pillar. She chose to dodge, which meant taking her eyes off Lisa for just a moment. That moment was all Lisa needed. She vaulted over a shorter pillar and landed behind Velthara while the warrior was still recovering her balance. Before Velthara could turn around, Lisa's blade found the same weak spot in the neck armor that had worked on Thekmor. Velthara fell to the arena floor, her weapons clattering beside her. The arena was silent again. But this silence felt different from the day before. Yesterday the Zephyrians had been shocked. Today they were beginning to be afraid. Lisa looked up at War Prime Kethvar. The alien leader's crystalline face showed no expression, but his 4 hands were clenched into fists. "The human has survived the second trial," he announced, his voice carrying across the quiet arena. As the guards escorted Lisa back to her cell, she could hear the crowd beginning to murmur. The conversations were different now. Yesterday, they had been discussing how lucky the human had gotten. Today they were wondering if it was really luck at all. In her cell, Lisa allowed herself a small smile. 2 victories didn't guarantee anything, but they had definitely gotten the Zephyrians' attention. More importantly, she was learning how they thought and how they fought. The real test would come in the remaining trials. Kethvar would not send any more young or overconfident warriors. The next opponents would be the best the Zephyrians had to offer, but Lisa had something the Zephyrians didn't expect: the ability to learn and adapt. Each fight taught her more about their weaknesses and their blind spots, and with each victory, she planted more doubt in their minds about their own superiority. 3 more trials remained, but the human was no longer just fighting for her life. She was fighting to prove that humanity deserved respect among the stars. The 3rd day brought the biggest change yet to the arena. When Lisa was escorted from her cell, she found that the entire fighting space had been transformed into a spherical chamber. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all curved, creating a perfect ball-shaped room with no gravity. Floating in the center of this sphere, Lisa felt her stomach lurch as her body adapted to the weightless environment. This was a new challenge entirely. The Zephyrians had designed this trial to use their natural advantages in zero gravity. The crowd was the largest yet. It seemed like every warrior on the ship had come to watch this fight. Lisa could see the hunger in their crystalline eyes. After 2 defeats, they needed to see their champion win. Her opponent floated into the chamber through another entrance. This warrior was different from the others. He was massive, even for a Zephyrian, and his armor was decorated with more battle trophies than she had ever seen. This was clearly a veteran of many campaigns. "I am Kepharon," he announced, his voice echoing in the spherical chamber. "Champion of War Prime Kethavar and destroyer of the Kethan Rebellion. I have killed more enemies than the human has years of life." War Prime Kethavar floated in his viewing area, his 4 arms spread to help him stay stable in the zero gravity. "This is my personal champion," he called out to the crowd. "He has never been defeated in combat. Today the human's luck ends." Lisa grabbed her metal blade as it floated past her. In zero gravity, fighting would be completely different. Every movement had to be controlled, or she would go spinning helplessly through the chamber. "Let the 3rd trial begin," Kethavar announced. Kepharon immediately demonstrated why the Zephyrians had chosen zero gravity for this fight. His 4 arms allowed him to control his movement much better than Lisa could with only 2. He could push off from one wall while aiming his weapons, using his extra limbs to stabilize himself. Lisa pushed off from the chamber wall, trying to build momentum, but Kephiron was ready for her. His energy weapons tracked her movement, and she barely managed to twist aside as deadly blasts filled the space where she had been. The champion was not just strong and experienced, he was smart. He used the spherical chamber like a three-dimensional chessboard, always positioning himself where he could attack while staying difficult to reach. Lisa tried several approaches, but each time Kephiron anticipated her moves. His years of zero-gravity combat showed in every calculated movement. He never wasted energy on unnecessary motion, and his forearms gave him options that Lisa simply didn't have. After several minutes of this deadly dance, Lisa realized she was in serious trouble. Unlike her previous opponents, Kephiron wasn't making emotional mistakes. He fought with cold professionalism, never letting anger cloud his judgment. But as she dodged another series of energy blasts, Lisa remembered something important about zero-gravity physics. In this environment, Newton's laws of motion were absolute. Every action had an equal and opposite reaction, and momentum was conserved. The Zephyrians were stronger than humans, but that strength could work against them in zero gravity. The more force they used, the more they would be affected by their own actions. Lisa began to change her tactics. Instead of trying to match Kephiron's three-dimensional movement, she started using the chamber walls more strategically. She ricocheted off surfaces at angles that would be impossible in normal gravity, using the physics of the environment to her advantage. Kephiron adjusted his strategy to counter her new approach, but Lisa had spent more time in zero gravity than most people. Her years of service on space stations and ships had taught her to think in three dimensions. She also noticed something about Kephiron's fighting style. He was used to opponents who fought like Zephyrians, using strength and direct attacks. He wasn't prepared for someone who used momentum and physics as weapons. Lisa's breakthrough came when she realized that the champion's own size and strength were making him predictable. When he pushed off from a wall to change direction, his massive bulk meant he couldn't stop or change course quickly. She began to use this against him, creating situations where his momentum would carry him past her, even if he wanted to stop. It was like being a small, fast ship fighting a large, powerful one. She couldn't match his firepower, but she could outmaneuver him. The crowd began to grow restless as the fight continued. They had expected their champion to end this quickly, but the human was proving more difficult than anyone had anticipated. Lisa saw her chance when Kephiron launched himself from one wall with particularly strong force, intending to ram her with his body while firing all his weapons. It was a devastating attack that should have ended the fight. Instead of trying to dodge normally, Lisa used the curved wall to redirect his momentum. She positioned herself so that when he reached her, she could use his own force against him. As he flew toward her, she grabbed onto his armor and used his momentum to swing around him. The maneuver sent Kephiron spinning toward the opposite wall much faster than he had intended. His extra arms couldn't help him now because he was rotating too quickly to control his movement. Lisa pushed off from his body as he spun, sending herself in the opposite direction while adding to his uncontrolled rotation. When Kephiron hit the chamber wall, he hit it with tremendous force, the combined result of his own strength and Lisa's redirection. The impact was devastating. Kephiron's armor cracked against the wall, and Lisa could hear something break inside his body. He bounced off the wall, no longer in control of his movement, floating helplessly in the center of the chamber. Lisa had kept her blade ready throughout the maneuver. As Kephiron drifted past her, stunned and disoriented from the impact, she struck at the same weak point in his neck armor that had worked on her previous opponents. But Kephiron was tougher than the others. Even wounded, he managed to grab Lisa with one of his forearms. For a moment, they grappled in the zero gravity, spinning together as each tried to gain an advantage. Lisa realized that in close combat, the champion's strength would overpower her quickly. She had to end this fight now, while he was still dazed from hitting the wall. Using every bit of her training, Lisa managed to work her blade free and drive it deeper into the gap in Kephiron's armor. This time, the strike was fatal. The great champion's grip loosened and he stopped moving. Lisa floated in the center of the sphere, breathing heavily, as Kefron's body drifted slowly toward one of the walls. The chamber was completely silent. War Prime Kethvar stared down at his fallen champion with an expression that Lisa couldn't read. The crowd of Zephyrian warriors seemed frozen in shock. Finally, Kethvar spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried, clearly through the chamber. The human has survived the third trial. As Lisa was escorted back to her cell, she could feel the change in the ship's atmosphere. The Zephyrian crew no longer looked at her with contempt or even respect. Now there was something like fear in their crystalline eyes. In her cell, Lisa tended to new bruises and cuts from the zero-gravity battle. 3 victories now, but she knew the hardest challenges were still to come. Kethvar had lost his personal champion, and that was not something he would forget or forgive easily. The remaining 2 trials would test everything she had learned, everything she was, and everything humanity had to offer in the face of impossible odds. But tonight, floating in her cell as the ship's artificial gravity held her to the floor, Lisa allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had proven that human ingenuity could overcome alien strength, that adaptability could triumph over raw power. The Zephyrians were beginning to understand that they had underestimated not just her, but her entire species. And that realization was spreading doubt through their ranks like a virus, weakening their confidence in their own superiority. 2 more trials remained, but the human had already won something more valuable than her freedom. She had won respect, and with it she had changed how an entire alien empire viewed humanity forever. The 4th day brought no escort to Lisa's cell. Instead, War Prime Kethvar himself appeared at her door, flanked by his elite guards. His crystalline face was grim, and Lisa could see barely controlled rage in his 4 eyes. "Human," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "You have made a mockery of our sacred trials. You have killed 3 of my finest warriors through treachery and luck." Lisa stood up slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I killed them through skill and intelligence, something your warriors seem to lack." Kethvar's 4 hands clenched into fists. "Today you face not 1 opponent but 2. First you will fight Morthkul, our executioner. If by some miracle you survive that, you will face me directly. No rest between fights, no mercy." "Is that honor?" Lisa asked. 2 against 1? Honor? Kethvar laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "You speak of honor after using tricks and cowardice to defeat true warriors? Today you die. The only question is how long it takes." The arena had been restored to its original form, a simple circular chamber with no obstacles or modifications. But the atmosphere was different. The crowd was larger and more aggressive, their crystalline faces reflecting years of anger and frustration. Lisa entered the arena to find 2 weapons waiting for her, her usual metal blade and something she hadn't expected to see again. A human pistol similar to the one that had been destroyed when she was captured. It held 6 shots, no more. Across the arena, a massive door opened, and Morthkul stepped through. He was the largest Zephyrian Lisa had ever seen, nearly 9 feet tall and built like a living fortress. His role as executioner was clear from his appearance. This warrior was designed for one thing: killing. "I am Morthkul," he rumbled, his voice deeper than the others. "I have ended the lives of 3,000 enemies. Today I add a human to that count." Unlike the previous warriors, Morthkul carried no energy weapons. His forearms ended in crystalline claws that looked sharp enough to cut through metal. He was a close combat specialist, designed to tear enemies apart with his bare hands. War Prime Kethvar stood in his viewing box. "Let the 4th trial begin," he called out. Morthkul moved forward slowly, deliberately. He wasn't rushing like Thekmor, or calculating like Velthara. He was methodical, like death itself. Each step brought him closer to Lisa with unstoppable certainty. Lisa raised the pistol and fired 3 quick shots at the executioner's head. All 3 bullets struck home, but they barely scratched his thick crystalline skull. Morthkul didn't even slow down. She tried for his eyes, firing her remaining 3 shots with careful precision. 1 bullet found its mark, cracking the crystal over his left eye and drawing a roar of pain from the massive warrior. But he kept coming. The pistol was empty, and Morthkul was almost within reach of his deadly claws. Lisa grabbed her metal blade and prepared for close combat against an opponent who outweighed her by hundreds of pounds. The executioner's first swipe would have taken her head off if she hadn't ducked. His claws whistled through the air where she had been standing. Lisa rolled between his legs, slashing at his ankles with her blade, but his armor was too thick there. What followed was the most brutal fight of Lisa's life. Morthkul was relentless, pursuing her around the arena with patient, deadly determination. His claws came within inches of her skin again and again. Lisa used every trick she had learned, every advantage she could find. She stayed mobile, using her speed against his strength. She targeted his damaged eye when possible, causing him pain but not serious injury. But she was tiring, and he was not. The executioner's endurance seemed limitless. Worse, he was learning from her tactics, adapting to her strategies just as she had adapted to her previous opponents. Lisa realized she couldn't win this fight through conventional means. Morthkul was too strong, too experienced, and too durable. She needed to find a weakness that no one expected. As she dodged another swipe from his claws, Lisa noticed something about the way he moved. The executioner's enormous size required more coordination than smaller warriors. When he attacked with one set of arms, he had to compensate with his other set to maintain balance. More importantly, his size made him top-heavy. If she could find a way to unbalance him, his own weight might work against him. Lisa began to change her tactics again. Instead of trying to damage Morthkul directly, she started attacking his balance. She struck at his legs when he was committed to an attack with his arms, forcing him to stumble. The executioner quickly realized what she was doing and tried to adapt, but his massive size made quick adjustments difficult. Lisa pressed her advantage, staying low and mobile while targeting his stability. Her opportunity came when Morthkul overreached during a particularly vicious swipe. His momentum carried him forward just slightly too far, and Lisa was ready. She dove between his legs again, but this time she grabbed onto his armor and used all her strength to pull him backward while he was already off balance. The combination of his forward momentum and her backward pull sent the massive warrior toppling. Morthkul crashed to the arena floor with tremendous force. Before he could recover, Lisa was on him, driving her blade into his damaged eye socket with all the strength she had left. This time, the wound was fatal. The executioner's massive body shuddered once, and then was still. Lisa stood over his body, exhausted and bleeding from dozens of small cuts. But there was no time to rest. The arena doors opened again and War Prime Kethvar himself stepped onto the fighting ground. The crowd fell completely silent. No Zephyrian had expected to see their leader enter personal combat. But Kethvar's pride had been wounded beyond repair by Lisa's victories, and only personal vengeance would satisfy him. "You have killed my champion," Kethvar said, drawing an ornate blade from his belt. "You have made my warriors doubt their own strength. Now you face me directly, human. Let us see how you fare against a true War Prime." Kethvar was everything. The other warriors had been and more. He was strong like Thekmor, intelligent like Velthara, skilled like Kepharon, and deadly like Morthkul. But he was also something else. Desperate. His entire reputation, his authority over the crew, depended on killing this human. The final battle was unlike any of the others. Kethvar fought with a fury that seemed to shake the arena itself. His energy weapons filled the air with deadly light, while his blade work pushed Lisa to her absolute limits. But desperation can be a weakness as well as a strength. Kethvar's need to win made him take risks that a calmer warrior might have avoided. And Lisa had learned something about Zephyrian psychology that she had been saving for this moment. "Your crew is already doubting you," she said during a brief pause in the combat. "They've seen a human kill your best warriors. What will they think when you fall too?" "I will not fall," Kethvar snarled, but Lisa could see that her words had struck home. "You will," she replied, "and when you do, they'll know that humans are not the weak creatures you thought we were. They'll know that your empire can be beaten." The more psychological warfare worked. Kethavar's attacks became more aggressive but less controlled. He was fighting not just Lisa, but the fear of what his defeat would mean. In the end, it was his own traditions that destroyed him. Zephyrian honor codes demanded that he fight fairly, even when facing what he considered an inferior opponent. He could have ordered his guards to kill Lisa at any time, but that would have shamed him before his crew. Lisa exploited this limitation ruthlessly. She fought dirty when necessary, using tactics that violated Zephyrian concepts of honor, but were perfectly acceptable to human military doctrine. The killing blow came when Kethavar, exhausted and frustrated, made the same mistake that had doomed his executioner. He overextended during an attack and Lisa was ready. Her blade found the weak point in his neck armor, and War Prime Kethavar fell to the arena floor. The silence that followed was absolute. Lisa stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by the bodies of the Zephyrian Empire's greatest warriors. In her hand, she held Kethavar's ceremonial blade, claimed by right of combat according to their own traditions. Slowly, Lisa raised the blade above her head. The crowd of Zephyrian warriors stared in shocked silence as she claimed her victory. "I am Lisa Grant of the human race," she called out, her voice carrying across the arena. "I came here in chains, but I leave with your respect. Let no one ever again say that humans are weak." The surviving Zephyrian officers had no choice but to honor their own customs. Lisa had won the trial of blood, defeated their war prime in single combat, and earned the right to command by conquest. 3 days later, Lisa's escape pod was launched toward human space, carrying not just a survivor, but a warrior who had fundamentally changed how an entire alien empire viewed humanity. Behind her, she left a Zephyrian crew that would never again underestimate the species from Earth. The human had entered their ship as a prisoner, but she departed as a legend that would spread throughout their empire. And in the cold depths of space, humanity had gained something more valuable than any military victory: respect among the stars, earned through courage, intelligence, and the refusal to surrender even in the face of impossible odds.